Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's licensing subcommittee. It's Thursday, the 11th of March, 2021, and the time is 2 p.m. My name's Councillor Mudassir Dean, and I'm the chairman for today's hearing. With me are my fellow councillors, Councillor Newell and Councillor Morris. I just introduced a number of other colleagues that are here as well. We have Linda Bainbridge, who's our legal advisor from the legal department at the Town Hall, who's here to advise us. We have Mrs. Klein from the licensing department, Shelley Greenwood and Liam Kelly from Trading Standards, who will be making a representation as well. And we have Mr. Howell from JTI, who have also submitted an application in the bundle, which we've all had a look at. Representing the actual business premises is the owner, which is Mr. Sullivan, and his representative today, his lawyer, is Mrs. Cartmel. And I'll just briefly go through the procedure of events. But before that, from the councillors, are there any declarations of interest?
No.
No, Chair.
Thank you. So the procedure of the meeting is as follows. It'll be a discussion-led debate, led by myself. Everyone will be given an opportunity to have their say and put their views forward. We'll first of all, we'll go over to the officers. Sorry, I do apologise, that's my doorbell ringing. Yeah, first of all, we'll go to the officers. We've had a good read of the 34-page report that's been submitted. If there's any additional questions and answers, we can ask the officers at that time. Then we'll go over to the other parties that are involved. So we'll have representation from Mr. Howell from JTI and Mr. Liam Kelly. We'll have an opportunity again, both the councillors and the representative of the business to ask any questions of Mr. Howell and Mr. Kelly. Once that's been done, then it's over to Mr. Sullivan and his representative to give your views and put your case forward. We'll all have an opportunity to ask you questions at that stage. Once that's been done, we'll have short summaries from people that have spoke, and there'll be no questions at that stage. And once the summaries have taken place, then other than the councillors and the legal advisor, everyone will leave the meeting and we'll retire to make a decision. Once that decision has been made, Mr. Sullivan will receive the decision through the post within the next 5 working days, and if he wishes to appeal that decision, he'll have 21 days to lodge an appeal to the Magistrates Court. Is Mr. Sullivan and Mrs. Cartmel okay with that?
Yes, that's smashing, Chair, thank you.
Right, okay, that's great. So what we'll do is, as I said, we've received the bundle, and myself and my colleagues have had good opportunity to look at that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that, Mrs. Klein?
No, Chair. All of the documentation is included in the report that you've received prior to the meeting. There are no further documentation or papers been submitted.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mrs. Klein from councillors?
No.
No, thank you.
Okay. Do we have any questions from Mrs. Cartmel or Mr. Sullivan for the licensing officer?
No questions, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go. Is there anybody else that would like to ask any questions, Mr. Kelly or Mr. Howell?
Not for me, thank you.
Okay. So what we'll do is we'll go over to Mr. Howell from JTI. Are you there, sir?
I am.
Yeah, would you like to make your representation, please?
Yes, I haven't got anything to add to the submission made in the bundle that you see. But the only issue that I'd like to draw attention to is the fact that although we referred to a test purchase made last year, there was also a test purchase made back in 2016. And the obvious question there is whether or not the owner of the store was the owner of the store back then, because in our view that would indicate an ongoing behaviour. That's the only point I'd like to draw attention to.
Could you give us some details about the test purchase in 2016, please?
Yes, so it's a very similar operation to that made last year. We'd have sent a test purchaser in. They'd have asked if there was any cheap tobacco available, and on that occasion I can confirm that a pack was bought. Let me just get the details up. That information would have been disseminated certainly to Revenue and Customs, with the intention of then passing that information down to trading standards for action, if they were not going to do so themselves.
Chair, if it assists, my client took over the premises in 2017.
Okay, in that case then that part of the submission is not relevant.
Right, okay. Thank you for that. Do we have any questions of Mr. Howell from councillors?
No, thanks.
No, thank you.
Any questions from Mrs. Cartmel or Mr. Sullivan?
No, thank you, Chair. I think that last issue was clarified, so I'm grateful. Thank you.
Right, okay. Mr. Kelly, it's over to you now from Trading Standards.
Thank you, Chair. All I'll say is the evidence being presented is just one sale of illegal tobacco, but it was quite obvious that that sale was illegal. It was not in plain packaging. It was sold for half the price that it normally costs. It's also believed to be counterfeit. From the evidence presented, we can say that illegal cheap cigarettes were being stored under the counter and appear to have been sold as a matter of routine. There's also a background of intelligence reports over the years that indicate illicit tobacco being sold. Okay, I've finished there now.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kelly. Any questions from councillors?
No, thanks.
No, thank you.
Any questions from Mrs. Sullivan or Mrs. Cartmel?
Yes, please, Chair. I'd just like to touch on the intel that has been touched on by Trading Standards. Now, am I right in saying that the intel is that tobacco is routinely kept under the counter? Is that correct?
That's just a deduction made from the fact that the representative from JTI went in, asked for cigarettes, and the person selling cigarettes reached under the counter to get some. So it's an assumption that the illegal cigarettes.
Did he go in the back room? Yeah, it wasn't under the counter at all. It says on the 6th of August, during this visit, the operative bought a pack of 20 Richmond, which a male got from a room in the back of the shop. There was no tobacco under the counter at all. There's never been any tobacco under the counter. So I'd just like to clarify where that intel comes from, when the only evidence we have is that there was the tobacco on that day and it was in the back room. It's quite a damning statement to say it was routinely kept under the counter.
Mr. Kelly, would you like to come back on that, please?
Yeah, I'm sure I've read this in the report from Andy Bolton.
Yeah.
I'm just checking it now.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, it says the same, for a room in the back of the shop. both the statements and the reports confirm.
I'm sorry, yeah, I've just read it. My apologies. I'm sure I've read that somewhere under the counter. It may have just been a throwaway comment. My apologies. I've got that completely wrong. Andrew Bolton in his statement said, from a room in the back of the shop. Yes,
thank you. No, that's great. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Any further questions?
No, I think we've clarified the Intel position up. So no, I'm happy to move on, Chair. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that, Mr. Kelly. So now we will move over to Mr. Sullivan and his representative, Mrs. Cartmel.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I won't rehearse the facts of this case. There was a visit made to the premises in August of 2020, the 6th of August. It was JTI conducting a test purchase. The premises sold a packet of Richmond cigarettes. These Richmond cigarettes there were 2 sleeves that the owner had bought for himself and didn't like. They were in the back room, and someone came in and asked for cigarettes, some cheap cigarettes, and he decided to sell them. He is a 62-year-old gentleman who has never been in trouble before. He has been a British citizen for a number of years. He has 3 grown-up children, an accountant, one that works with the police, and another son who is a manager in a shop. He is a gentleman of good character. The premises, when you visit the premises, it is pristine. It's absolutely beautiful. I've never been to a premises where it's such a tight ship is run, and it's unfortunate that Mr. Sullivan has let himself down on this occasion by making a stupid decision and selling these cigarettes on. He knows that cigarettes must be checked, and you can only buy them from an approved retailer. And I've gone through and trained all of his staff and him on illicit tobacco, together with underage sales, due diligence, proxy sales, everything connected to the sale of alcohol and tobacco. That training was conducted at the premises by myself. I've visited the premises, I think, twice now. This is an isolated incident. I know you may hear that from every premises licence holder, but that was why it was so important that I clarified the issue on the intel. That intel was very damning to my client. He is a good retailer and has had no issues for a number of years. The shop he took over in 2017, and since then there has been no incidents that have caused trading standards to visit him or the police, or for him to receive any warnings or advice. He has run the premises without incident since 2017. Bearing in mind the issues at the premises and the Licensing Act, we're not here to decide the guilt or innocence or to punish. It's a remedial piece of legislation. You should only do as much as is necessary and appropriate to promote the licensing objectives. This review has given my client a big wake-up call, really. It was, I think, because there is such an issue with cigarettes in Bolton. I mean, I've noticed, and even going through the figures in the reports, 19 out of 31 shops sold illicit tobacco. In 2018, it was 23 out of 37. So I think now that Bolton Council and JTI have had this sweep of all the premises, it has highlighted to the trade within Bolton that they must toe the line and that they can't take any shortcuts. I would ask you to consider attaching conditions to the premises licence in this instance. It is an isolated incident. It's 1 packet of cigarettes that was sold, although he admits he did buy 2 sleeves. After he found out about these issues, he made sure there was no cigarettes left on the premises at all. He took and he has introduced a tobacco and alcohol policy. So even staff are not allowed to bring their own cigarettes into work now. Any cigarettes on the premises must be UK duty paid, and he must keep all the receipts. I don't know if I can add much to what I've already said. It is an isolated incident, and I'd ask if you're not minded to consider the imposition of a condition, a short suspension, like a 48-hour suspension of the licence, would mark the lack of judgment on this time, and it would also serve as a deterrent so that no future problems arise at the premises. I don't know if you have any questions, councillors.
Yes, we do. Can I go over to Councillor Newell first, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Ms. Cartmel,
Yes.
Your client knew that this tobacco was illicit when he sold it, didn't he?
Well, he didn't know it was illicit, but he certainly he knew it wasn't. He knew he'd bought it cheap. Yes.
Because he sold it for £4.80, didn't he? The packet of
Yes.
cigarettes. So he knew it wasn't duty. He knew it wasn't
Yes.
duty paid, didn't he? Yeah.
He did. Yeah. He bought 2 sleeves for £70. That's what he bought for himself, and obviously he couldn't smoke them. If they were counterfeit, they can't have been that nice. Then when someone's come in, he had them in the back, and they asked for a packet of cigarettes, and he's gone and sold them. So that's why I said yes, he did.
So he did know they were illicit. He did
Yes.
know he shouldn't have sold them. Right.
Yeah. Yes. He did
So he
know
sold
that they
one
weren't illegal.
packet. He sold one packet. What did he plan to do with the rest of the cigarettes?
Well, what did you plan to do? I think, in fairness, councillor, it's only fair to say that had you come in, he might have sold the rest of them if somebody had asked, but we don't know because that never occurred. But certainly, he didn't think anything. He thought he was doing someone a favour. He's got these cigarettes that he can't smoke, so yeah, he probably would have sold the rest of them.
So when you say thought he was doing somebody a favour, did he sell that person the cigarettes because he thought he was doing them a favour, or was it a business transaction?
No, the guy came in and said, "Have you any cheap cigarettes?" He had these 2 sleeves of Richmond in the back that he couldn't smoke and he wanted to get rid of. So he just said, "Yeah, I've got a packet of cigarettes," and he charged him £4.80.
So when you say he couldn't smoke these cigarettes, what was his intention with the 2 sleeves of cigarettes? What did he intend to do with them?
He intended when he bought them to smoke them himself.
Right.
That's what he intended. But obviously, when he tried them, they're not his usual brand of cigarettes.
So he decided
Yeah.
to sell them.
Yes, yeah.
Right. So he could have sold the other cigarettes.
Well,
What happened to them, by the way, the other cigarettes?
oh God, as soon as he found out about this, he threw them away.
He threw them all away?
Horrified. Yes, he's a 62-year-old gentleman that's never been in trouble. He's got 3 grown-up children. He keeps his shop pristine. He's not a man that ever wants to be in trouble with the law. You know, he's
Right. So
horrified by how stupid he's been.
So what happened to the other cigarettes that were in those sleeves? He threw them away?
He threw them away, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ms Cartmel. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Newell. Mrs Cartmel, I'd like to ask a couple of questions as well. Can you confirm that, I think you said that Mr Suleiman bought these whilst he was abroad? Is that correct?
No, I don't think. Where did you buy them? He bought them off. He hadn't been abroad. He bought them for himself. He bought 2 packets for £70 off a friend of his.
Yeah, where did he buy those? Was it in Bolton? Was it? So it wasn't abroad.
A gentleman came into the shop. I think this is another problem as well that I've noticed throughout every shop. You've got so many people coming in offering cigarettes. You know, in each shop, I'm representing a few different businesses in Bolton, and it seems to be illicit tobacco is offered to shopkeepers all the time.
Right. So can you confirm? Is this the only time that he's bought this type of cigarette?
Absolutely.
Or
Yeah.
it doesn't? Was he doing it on a regular basis?
No, he's never done this before. He's never been in trouble. They were literally, he said, some cigarettes he purchased for himself, and then he couldn't smoke them. So I think there was one packet missing out of the 2 sleeves.
Yeah, I mean, he runs his own business that sells cigarettes.
Yeah.
Why would he? What was the reason for buying it off somebody that came into his shop?
Just for personal use, because they were cheaper. Obviously, cigarettes in the shop are like nearly £10 a packet, where these, he says to me that he just thought they were duty-free cigarettes. So there were 2 sleeves of Richmond, and he thought rather than him paying £10 a packet, that's why literally he only bought 2 sleeves. There was, I don't know if the premises have been visited on any other occasions, but they could take dogs in there. They've never, ever had illicit tobacco on the premises.
So does Mr. Sullivan feel that it was an appropriate thing to do?
No, not now.
No, not now. At the time. At the time.
At the time, I'll be honest with you, Chair. He really didn't see a big issue. He thought he's bought these cigarettes, and it's not something he does routinely. It's just someone came in and asked for a cheap packet. So at the time, he didn't really see, the massive importance of it. When now he understands, which is why we did the cigarette and the alcohol tobacco training. I've explained the different types of tobacco. You've got illicit, you've got counterfeit tobacco, how to spot them. Even we've gone through it with the alcohol. You've got a UV light to check the duty stamps of alcohol. So he's had all this training now, and he understands the importance. Most of my clients don't understand that cigarettes can carry, a potential prison sentence. I don't think the message is getting out strong enough to the trade of just how bad, illicit tobacco is. And I think that's probably a good thing to come out of all these reviews now. That, it's really sent a message to the town, I think.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from officers?
Chair, it's Patricia Klein. Can I just ask a question? I was a little bit confused in relation to Councillor Newall's question about the disposal of the cigarettes. When was Mr. Suleiman made aware that he'd sold illicit tobacco to an operative? Hello?
Sorry. Apologies, I've left my phone on mute. It was only when the review papers came in that he became aware. That's what I mean. The cigarettes were still there. There was 2 packets gone.
So that was August, and the review papers have been submitted this year. So they were there for some time.
Yeah, they were there in the storeroom for ages.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Klein. Do we have any questions from Mr. Kelly or Mr. Hull?
Mr. Kelly, here I have no questions.
Thank you. Mr. Hull, do you have any questions before we move on?
Perhaps not a question, just a statement. I find it strange that our test purchaser was able to go in on that day out of the blue and be the only person who asked for cheap tobacco and got the pack.
Yeah, Mr. Howell,
between the time of August.
Sorry, you'll get an opportunity to summarise in a moment.
Okay, no questions.
Thanks. Right, so if there's no further questions for Mrs. Cartman and Mr. Suleiman, can we move on to summaries, please? Mrs. Klein?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just to draw members' attention, of course, to the determination which is outlined at page 10, and also to the 2 supporting documents that are there for your guidance. That's the statement of licensing policy, the council's statement of licensing policy, and also the guidance issued under the section 182, and in particular section 11, which deals with the reviews arising in connection with crime, which is number 11.24 to 11.28, and in particular 11.27 and 11.28, which deals with this type of hearing, and that's on page 93 of the section 182 guidance. And that's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Klein. Mr. Howell, would you like to summarise?
Yes, so I'd just like to mention one point that was brought up in addition to that's in the evidence is the statement that Mr. Sullivan only sold one of those packs of cigarettes, and that it was pure chance that our test purchaser happened to be in the store on that day asking for cheap cigarettes. I just find that slightly strange that in between the time of the test purchase in August and the serving of the papers this year, that those cigarettes would have remained there without being sold or indeed have been resupplied at some point. Thank
you for that. Mr. Kelly, would you like to summarise?
Yes, regardless of whether this might have just been a one-off or something wider, it would appear to be an offence, the sale of that packet of cigarettes. And Home Office guidance makes it clear that this type of criminal activity should be treated as particularly serious. Okay.
Thank you for that. Mrs. Cartmel, it's over to you now to briefly summarise.
Thank you. Chair, I won't go through my submissions again. What I'll do is, this is an isolated incident. It might come across as unrealistic, but we have no other evidence of sales. In fact, the only other sale that was mentioned was previous to my client taking over the premises. The cigarettes weren't easily available under the counter. They were stored in the back room, and my client has been consistent in his submissions. He bought the cigarettes for himself, and he didn't like them. I think I admitted to the committee that perhaps had somebody else asked, he may have sold them. I'm not going to say to the committee that those no more cigarettes would have been sold had someone asked, but nobody did ask. It's an isolated incident, and now the upshot or as a consequence of the review, the training has been carried out with the staff. So the premises is actually better equipped now to deal with illicit tobacco or to avoid illicit tobacco and to promote the licensing objectives than it's ever been. This has been, like I said, a shock to my client, and this is the first time he's been in trouble. To revoke a license, even though the guidance says it should be seriously considered, in terms of illicit tobacco, would be disproportionate. I don't think it would be necessary and appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. My client knows that he is going to be under the spotlight from now on. He knows that he has got effectively a marker on him, so that any future incidents are going to be treated as very, very seriously. So I've explained the consequences of any future breaches of the Licensing Act to him, or in fact any legislation. I would ask you to impose conditions as a way of dealing with this review. The conditions relating to staff training in illicit tobacco. The premises must implement and ensure that a tobacco policy is in operation at the premises, and all alcohol and tobacco receipts must be retained in the premises and made available immediately to officers when requested for a period of 12 months. Those are the conditions that I think will deal with the issues that have arisen here. If those conditions are in place, there can be no doubt that A, the staff and the business operator knows what they're doing, and B, that officers can go in and immediately see all of the invoices to legitimise all the alcohol and tobacco purchases. It focuses the owner's mind, so he knows that the only items that can be in that store are ones that have a legitimate invoice. If you are minded to mark this in another way, again, I'd ask for a 48-hour suspension of the licence. That would be a stark reminder to him that he must ensure that all future purchases are from legitimate retailers. I think those are my submissions. I don't know if you've anything to add, Mr. Sullivan. No? Anything else? No. That's great. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Mrs. Cartmel. We've sort of listened to everyone's statements now, and the councillors with legal advisor will retire to make a decision. As I said, you'll receive that decision in writing within the next 5 working days, and if you do wish to appeal against the decision, you'll have 21 days to submit an appeal at the Magistrates Court. Yeah. So just before we sign off, I'd like to thank Mr. John McMurray for the live transmission, organising that, and also Mrs. Susan Bailey for organising the meeting. Thank you.